Welcome to Bastionland Broadcasting, where tonight we are going back to the series formerly known as Bastionspiration, but I really hated saying it every single time I had to say it. And it's one of those things where you can have like a bad name as a joke, but the fact is you are still using a terrible name for something. And as you know, I basically now every every game, every game I make, the title of the game tends to start as a little bit of a joke, and then I end up keeping it. So Bastionspiration is no more. Instead, we have the incredibly, well, you tell me whether it sounds interesting or not. We're looking at just design inspiration. So I did a couple of these previously where we talked about video games that inspired the design of either Electric Bastionland or Into the Odd, or just generally that I thought had an interesting kind of design philosophy that matched up with some kind of something that I like about RPG design. Now, I teased this on Twitter earlier today by saying that this is potentially the number one game I would point to if you want to look at a game for its design. For reference, when I normally do these, I tend to have like a little list of like 5 bullet points of things I want to talk about when it comes to that game. Today I have an entire A4 2-column sheet. So we're going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive into a game that I am not especially good at, but I do have some opinions on. And I think there's a lot of very interesting crossover between this game and some of the stuff that you can do with role-playing games. So without any further delay, I'm going to bring back the ambient music, because the audio of this game is, I think, a significant part of it. This one's a little bit raucous for my liking, so maybe we'll change that. But the game in question, let me get us onto a nice gentle piece of music. The game in question is a game called N+. Let me get back to the title screen. In fact, it's called N++, sorry, I should say. I mentioned on the the audio test that if these noises are way too obnoxious or way too loud for the stream, do tell me and I will turn them down. I will definitely be turning my speakers down. N++ is a platform game, and in fact, Metanet Software have called it the world's best platformer. So the company, the publishers that made this game, the designers that made this game, called it the world's best platform game. And whereas I am in no position to say whether or not I feel that is true, I do think the design of this game has really kind of captivated me. And to hear the designers talk about the game, I've found really fascinating. And there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with this game. I mentioned that I had a list. I will give a very, very brief introduction. You can see in the background, this is not me playing. It will just be rolling some demo levels. It's a very basic premise. You are a ninja, and you're trying to escape the level. You're trying to get to the exit, and usually you'll have to unlock the exit by hitting a switch. And on the way, there's various hazards. You're trying to also do it in a good amount of time. It's a very simple game, but there's also a lot going on, and that's what I wanted to tap into today, and to look at how, if you're not at all interested in video game design, but you work on role-playing games and you are designing specifically, especially if you're designing adventures and dungeons and locations for role-playing games, what we can take away from this. Now, I'm very aware that the schools of tabletop game design and video game design, there are vast differences, and it's not a one-to-one thing where you can learn a lesson from a well-designed video game and it's something that you can apply directly to a tabletop game. But I do think there's some interesting stuff in here that is worth considering, and I've personally found kind of interesting myself. So, the original Flash game, Awkward Turtle mentions sneaking the original N onto school computers to play it secretly. I think it was even. It was a Flash-based game, so I'm sure you could play it in a browser. And that kind of history as a Flash game is, I think, what has helped keep the design on this track, where, as you can tell from looking at it probably, I think it's fair to say this is a game that embraces its minimalism, and that's something I'm going to be talking about quite a bit as we get through it. But to give you a history, the original Flash game, 2005, then that was simply called N, and then N Plus was their kind of release on actual platforms. So that was on like Xbox 360, I think, DS, 2008. N++, which is nearly this version, was released in 2015 on just about every platform, and this version specifically is the N++ Ultimate Edition, which they've said is their final version now. Metanet Software have said, this is it, we're not going to make any more of this game after this. This is literally the ultimate version of this game. And I've got, like I said, I've got a lot to work through, but what I'm going to start with is I'm just going to show you just the first couple of levels in the introduction section. Before I do that, no, let's do that. So, at your most basic level, you are a ninja. There are literally 3 inputs to the game. Well, I'm cheating slightly. There are 3 controls to the game. There's left, right, and jump. And again, owing to its kind of browser game heritage, there's no analog control as far as I'm aware. It is literally left input, right input, and jump. And the way that you use those inputs, you have a vast amount of control over how your ninja moves. And it's all based on physics, which sounds obvious, but the feel of it is quite different to other platforms. It feels a lot more weighty. There's a lot more of a focus on momentum. You have a degree of it. When I say physics, I'm not talking realistic, because you have a good degree of sort of air control. So you can obviously jump and change direction mid-air. There is a large focus on wall jumping, wall sliding. There's all sorts of fancy maneuvers you can pull off that I won't be able to do. But it all comes from 3 inputs. There is another input that I will mention when we need it. But what has really impressed me about this game, and it's something that kind of meshes with what I have tried to do with like Into the Odd, Electric Bastionland, and other games, is it is minimalist, but it strips away all of the non-essential elements to have a really minimalist core, but there is a lot going on around that core, and I'll explain as we go on. But it's about having a very solid core, and then not just settling back and saying, right, well, we've got a really solid core, that's it. It's about then putting that core to work and showing how you can use that core to do interesting things. So it's quite easy to create a very simple system, and a system that's very fast and simple, and like Into the Odd or Electric Bastionland, where it's quick and it's easy to explain and it works okay. That bit is relatively simple. The thing that I think is more important is then showing people what you can do with that and looking at the design space around that system. And that's what this game does really well. Because I'll get to why I've sort of mentioned that, but just to explain a little bit about what I'm doing right now. This is the introduction. It is not called a tutorial, it is called an introduction. And that is because it is introducing you to all the different, it's introducing you to the basics of what you can do with this system. So you can see in the bottom right hand corner, each of these levels, they're always one screen, and they all have a little name at the bottom. So this one is called Basics Redux. So we're very much learning the basics of the system now. We're getting used to how the ninja moves. And we've just completed 5 levels, which is an episode. So each episode is broken down into 5 levels. And that was episode A00. So as you can see, there are 25 of these episodes. So that's 125 one-screen levels in the introduction. Then in the N++ section, there are 100 episodes, each with 5 levels. So that's 500 levels in the N++ section. There are the same amount in the Ultimate section and in the Legacy section. So whereas I think a lot of games sort of bring out big numbers to try and like sound like a big sales pitch, what really interests me about this game is every level is handmade and designed very purposefully and very small, but there are 4,340 levels is the number I was able to get. I believe there are also some secret levels which I'm not going to be anywhere near good enough to access. But yeah, over 4,000 levels. And this matches very much with some of what I see in certain schools of design. You could kind of say it's an OSR thing. I don't know if it's universal across designers that would sort of call themselves OSR. But the idea of having a very simple core and then exploring every little element of what you can do with that core really appeals to me. And this game is like a great example of a game that has done that, of a game that has taken something very simple and then actually done the work with it and created a kind of ultimate experience based on that core of the game. It would be like if, let me bring out an example, say Rhesus. I don't think I've ever had to say it out loud. The Anything RPG is a very simple role-playing game, you know, a few pages long. And then I know that there's the Rhesus Compendium, which is very interesting as well, and has a lot of good stuff in there. This would be like if they did a Rhesus, you know, encyclopedia, and somebody's explored every single possible use of the game. So I'm going to try and play and talk at the same time. If you're already interested in this game, I hope you know that I'm amateur enough that this is obviously not paid promotion, but this is about £10, I believe, on many different platforms. I can thoroughly recommend getting it, but there's a lot more that I want to say about this game. So we're going to work our way through the introduction, and I'm going to show you the kind of the fundamentals of the game while I talk about sort of why it appeals to me so much specifically. And then I'm going to dip into some of the more advanced levels and show you some of the more interesting things that are going on with the design. And I'm going to try and talk and play at the same time, which is going to be a challenge at the best of times. So I've mentioned about the physics-based movement and this kind of, there's a very specific feel to the ninja. Like, he doesn't feel like Mario or Super Meat Boy or Celeste, or any of these kind of other like very challenge-based platform game characters. The ninja feels very, very weighty, and it gives it a kind of roots it in like reality. Weirdly, like I say, even though obviously these wall jumps are like crazy, like it's not at all a simulation of like parkour, but it gives it a feel of like a solid base of reality. And on top of that, yeah, so Skyfall of Dust mentions Gree, and you know I played a little bit of that, but for some reason that game didn't grab me. I loved the visuals of it, but the gameplay just couldn't keep hold of me for whatever reason. I think part of it is that this game appeals to me because I am terribly bad at sort of concentrating for long amounts of time on a long task. If you give me 100 small tasks, I'll be pretty happy. But if you give me one very long task, I will find myself getting distracted, and I will. I'm getting distracted from this long run-on sentence, so that kind of sums it up. Whereas here, everything's like in like bite-sized chunks. Each level is like less than a minute. So, you know, if it's a clean run like that, we're talking like 5 minutes to get through an episode. But aside from the sort of, I spoke about the minimalism. Aside from that, I think this is a game that really embraces a love of design in a number of different ways. So, a lot of my games have been described as minimalist before, but they're also a little bit, not wordy. I do like to get to the point, but it's very difficult to make words truly minimalist, whereas these levels are clearly, and these levels and the sort of whole design of the game is very clearly based in presenting their ideas in as clear a way as possible. So without even having played this game, you can probably work out that the red spiky things are bad and you don't want to touch them. I mean, have I hit one of them yet? So let me show you what happens if you hit one of these mines. You explode. And then I didn't need to exit out, then I hit the wrong button. So let me demonstrate, because one of the things that I do think is great is how quickly you can restart. So you know that gold is good and the red thing is bad. But aside from that, the levels just look beautiful. I think, like, I'm a big fan of like this kind of minimalist abstract design, like visual design, very striking sort of shapes and things like that. But I should see with later levels, they're not always simple, but they're always kind of striking. But I love the way that it embraces the design, because there's lots of empty space left there deliberately that could have been like, you know, some developers might have put like a texture on the material to make it look like stone, or they may have just tried to like introduce more interesting like shapes, so there's, you know, break up the space a little bit. But here it is all about those clean lines. And that sort of love of design extends into all of these colour palettes that you can choose. And it sounds like such a silly thing, but it's like how sometimes the layout or the colour palette of a book, a role-playing game book, will make you feel a certain way. So it's a very obvious example, but if you look at like Morkborg, the colour palette tells you something about that game. Or Mothership, you know, the visual design tells you something about the game. So we can choose a completely different colour scheme, and it's getting you into that frame of mind of like appreciating the visual design. And that sort of runs through the whole game. So this is a game about level design, I think, is my takeaway from it. The core is so simple that there's not a vast amount there. Like I say, there's like wall jumps. There's certain types of jump you can do off like curved surfaces and certain angles of floor, but it really is, you know, move and jump. And then the appeal is in the level design. And I think that kind of leaning into that so hard, I really appreciate sort of how heavy it goes on that kind of focus on design as a kind of thing to be enjoyed. It doesn't really try and hide it. Like, it feels like, I know this sounds really pretentious, but it feels like a game designer's game. I'm trying not to die while I talk here. So yeah, there's that. Now, if you've been paying attention to this introduction, I think this tutorial section in particular, and I called it tutorial there when really it's an introduction. I'm 3 episodes in, so you know it's quite substantial. But the very fact that believe it or not, I'm quite enjoying replaying through these introduction levels. I'm not enjoying this colour scheme. We're definitely gonna, let's go oceanographer. And the thing you might have noticed is this doesn't feel like a tutorial in many ways. It's not stopping me and flashing up a message to say, if you dash into the wall, you can do a double jump, which allows you to leap higher. You know, people always rave about Mario, like Mario Brothers Level 1, World 1 Level 1. Well, this is like an entire 125 levels of that philosophy of not having a tutorial, but having something that introduces the players to the concept by getting them to do it and giving them a challenge. So this is, I think, the first time that we've seen these switches. I'm not being told anything. I can work out that I can't run into these walls. I can busy myself grabbing this gold here. But I'm obviously going to touch this switch and see that that switch goes up. And I know that it's a very simple game, and some games you can't do this quite as easily. Some games you need to stop and say, look, here is a written explanation of how this system works. But I genuinely believe that even some very simple platformers would have like frozen my character and had a little speech bubble come out and say, oh, how am I going to get through these doors? There must be a switch somewhere. And then maybe like the switch would have flashed. And I know there's a lot of hate for like that kind of tutorial already, so I'm not going to add to it. And it's not about even trying to say like, oh, players should have to work it out for themselves. Like, I genuinely think people will work it out. Like, I don't think anyone's going to play N++ and not be able to work out how the switches work and how to open doors. Because this tutorial, this introduction is like based around that. And sometimes you have sometimes the level is enough on its own. But in the bottom right, where you've got these level names, I'm sure I've spoken before about how in Into the Odd and Electric Bastion, and I didn't want to have any kind of fluff in there that wasn't tied to the game itself, that wasn't tied to some part of the game. So if I wanted to explain that things in Bastion are a certain way, for the most part, I wanted to do that by putting stuff into the character classes that explain that, and sort of expressed it through actual game content rather than stopping the game and having like a page of fiction that explained about Bastion. This game kind of goes the full distance with that, because these so usually it's just one word, so skydiver. It doesn't tell me much, and I probably don't need it. And in this case, it's probably quite it's just a little bit of flavour. But on some levels, that will be your clue. And that'll kind of be telling you like a little bit about the concept. So there's one that says something like learning to not jump. And the key to getting through the level is to not jump, because you're going to hit these mines that are above you. Now I'm jumping around my list here. I had a very sensible list of points to get through. In fact, no, I won't jump to enemies yet, because I think the way that enemies are handled is especially interesting. Now I've got myself into a situation here. There we go. And if you are thinking about picking this up, one thing I will say is I'd kind of forgotten about this game. It was on my list of things to talk about when I knew I was doing this whole series of talking about video games that have inspired my design. But I'd kind of put it away for a while. And then when I loaded it back up today, just to sort of make sure it would work with the streaming software, I ended up just like playing it for an hour and just loving it, because it's just such a joy to sort of move through this world. Right, let's do one more episode of the kind of introduction, and then we're going to talk about some of the actual levels, because remember we're still in the introduction here. But while we're here, I'm going to talk a little bit about the difficulty. So you might be thinking that I'm exaggerating by saying that I'm enjoying playing through this introduction, because I think I've got about 24 hours on this game, so I've not, there's not many games that I tend to play for like hundreds of hours like some people do. I I move on to different games very quickly. But I could go back to these levels, because the thing that's so good about these levels is with one level they're able to have multiple ways you can complete it. So obviously there's things like saying, you know, trying to complete it faster, or taking deliberately like limiting yourself. But what they actually have is, you can see next to some of these levels there's a little gold square. That means that you've collected all of the gold on that level. So at the moment I've just been trying to get to the exit, but if you collect all of the gold, that's like the secondary objective. And as you can see, even though this is the introduction section, it's actually quite difficult to collect all the gold. Now, if you are a pro N++ player and you're thinking it's not difficult, what I mean, of course, is that I find it difficult, and I can only talk for my own abilities here, and I am not a strong player of this game, as you can see. But yeah, I find it challenging, and I've beaten, you know, a good half of the levels that are in this game. I'm not going to keep going for that one piece of gold, but yeah, you can see like even the introduction levels have this kind of variable difficulty. Let's just do this jump. Oh, so close. Right, let's smash through here. Here we go. This is a good example of a level where the title is helping me out. So the level name in the bottom right hand corner is called Tiny Taps, and you can probably like hear my the stick of my controller going mad, because it is a level of doing tiny little taps of the controller. And I think this is the last level of this episode, and then we're going to move on. Let's grab some of these. So it's these like challenges within the level, so like levels within a level almost. Huh? And that's on top of the fact that there are 4,000 levels. So it's the amount of like design that's gone into this game is absolutely ridiculous. I know that I said there's 4,000 levels, but the sort of figures that Metanet gave, where they spend, I believe it's just a 2-person team. I'm aware of 2 of the designers, and I think it's just those 2. They said 2 to 3 hours for each level. So across 4 years of development, 10,000 hours spent on just level design. There we go. So we're done with that. Done with that episode. Now, we're going to move on to the actual game itself, and I'm going to look for something that looks a little bit more interesting, or rather, something that shows the point that I'm trying to make. Let's look at this one. It looks kind of interesting. So, the name, Mount Erebus. The shape is obviously quite evocative, and this is something that I think this game does surprisingly well, and is something that I think is really applicable to role-playing games. Because in role-playing games, you don't always have the luxury of being able to show someone some fantastic art. You have to sometimes inspire them with words, and if you start talking for too long, people stop listening. So being able to do something with just a few words and a sort of evocative, almost like a shape of the description, you're expecting the player to kind of fill in the blanks themselves and kind of embellish on your very core description. And this is it. So, you know, the palette is still what I had before. Okay, that's scary. Right, we'll talk about him in a second. It's little tiny nuggets of storytelling that I think make this game really interesting to me. And I'm not going to say this has got one of the great video game stories of all time, but it's just little bits of description like that, like calling this level the mountain and designing it in this way, it reminds me of like Lego bricks, like when you'd sort of stick 3 red bricks together and you'd say it was a car, even if you didn't have the wheels. And you know, I might have previously worried about that kind of attitude appearing like childish, but now that I'm an uncool old man, I think you can embrace that kind of childhood view of the world in some ways, especially when it comes to like imagination. I know it sounds a bit idealistic, but I think it's a powerful thing that still exists inside all of us, like being able to look at a shape and see a mountain. I just love that they kind of have embraced that. So let's have a look. Rebunk. Well, tell you what, this is a good example of how the enemies work in this game. There are only a few types of enemies. I think there's maybe like 9. Ooh. And the common thread with all the enemies is you can't kill them. But they are entirely predictable. There's no enemy in the game that uses AI to try and appear like a living thing or like another player. Instead, they are all... I mean, this one, literally, kind of appears to be some kind of robot. So, the world is balanced in their favour because you cannot kill them. And if they hit you, that's it, one shot. You're dead. But you have the advantage of thought and problem solving. And every enemy is scary because they can kill you in one shot. And I like that. I like that. I think it's very easy when you're designing monsters. I know we spoke about this a little bit when we did the monster design episode. Sorry, I'm dying a lot because I'm trying to like provoke these robots into attacking me. It's very easy to just look at a monster and try and make it scary with numbers or like status conditions or special powers that like interact with the game rules, and you know, nothing wrong with that at all. I'm gonna have to just concentrate and beat this level, or else we're gonna be here all night. So it's very easy to make a sort of numerically scary monster, but sometimes it's more interesting to make a monster that is scary because of its behavior and put more focus on how it behaves, because that can make a monster interesting. I'm getting worse at this. This is the way that it works. You get frustrated on one level and you start to like regress in your skill level. Right, that single mine is getting me so many times. So the key isn't like getting bigger numbers. The key isn't me finding some armor so that all of a sudden these ground, I think they're called ground guards or something. It's not about finding something that renders them no longer. It's not about finding something that sort of renders them no longer a threat. It's about learning their behavior and coming up with like strategies to overcome them. So with these guys, like, they're terrifying the first time you meet them, but yeah, once you learn that you can just kind of taunt them into coming towards you, you can run straight into them like that and they'll kill you. See, this is what happens. You get into this zone. This is why this was like a terrible choice for a video. What am I going to do here? Look. So I need to... Right, okay. Abandon the stream. I'm going to go silent for this one and just do it, and then we can get back to what we were doing. Yes, you go that way. Phew, right, there we go. So the good thing about this, which has been exemplified here inside my head now, is that I am kind of angry at the level for being difficult, but mainly I am learning a little bit from each attempt. Or if I fail, it's my own fault. Because the way that the monsters are designed is so clear, and I have nobody to blame but my own decisions and my own execution. And I think that is one thing that I really want to... I know that I said earlier that things don't map perfectly between video game design and role-playing game design. And I think the main difference for me is that kind of the satisfaction of being able to execute something in a video game, like just getting good at controlling your character, doesn't really have an equivalent in role-playing games for me. So, whereas I do enjoy that in a video game, it's not what I look for in a role-playing game. Oof. Right, A Little Too Busy at the Drone Factory is the name of this level. So I do like that they just put in these little bits of flavour. Like I say, it just sets some sort of tone. Okay, this is right, okay. This is horrifying. So remember I said there was an extra button? If I press the Y button on this controller, you explode. And then before you know it, you're back at the beginning. So I'll talk a little bit more about the difficulty later on, but this is a perfect match for role-playing games where if you're going to have high lethality like this, make it quick to restart. Make it so that you can roll a character in a few minutes. Okay. So again, we've got another example of an enemy who we can't kill. We can't blow up that turret. We're never going to unlock the ability to drop down a barrier that stops that turret from attacking us. But we can get better at avoiding it. So where are we going now? Yeah, so we just need to hit the button. So I've got all the information I need. The design is clear. Get this and then trick it like that. Drop down here, hit mine. Let's try again, don't rush. Got another rather unfortunate enemy here. Thank you. And again, these enemies are terrifying. Like, they will wreck you if you're not careful. But if you think about it and you're careful, and in isolation, they're relatively easy to overcome. Awkward Turtle says, yeah, if you have high lethality, it helps when the deaths are funny. That's it. That is a great point, actually. I think if you're sort of setting the tone, then people don't mind so much if their death is funny. I think it depends. Character death is an entire different topic that I will perhaps talk about another time. And I think the short version of it is it's all about setting the tone. And, one of the things that this game does is straight away from the introduction, if you're playing for the first time, you're going to die quite a bit just hitting mines and stuff like that. So you do get into that frame of mind of you're not going to go and do a perfect run through this game straight away. So what have we got? The Squizzler. Okay. So we've got a laser thing over there. We're going to get killed in a second. No, we're good. Okay, this is horrible. Right. So we'll let this through. And then we need to get down here. Now, these little white spots are, I think, one of the best little bits of design in any game that I've played. So these mines, the pink mines, will just blow you up straight away. The ones that are just little white dots, they are toggle mines. And they start off as just a little switch, but if you touch it, it basically activates the mine, and the next time you touch it, you will obviously explode. And this is like an ongoing theme with this game, which is reaping what you sow in terms of like the danger. So there's quite a few levels. It'd be great if we got one now, actually. There's quite a few levels where you sort of have to backtrack on yourself, and there's a sort of ongoing theme where you can make your life more difficult for your return journey if you're not careful by sort of tripping a load of these mines. I'll try and find a level that exemplifies it. But here we go. But there's a whole school of levels within this game that are kind of based around that, and based around making the return journey as interesting as possible through a level. So sometimes a level will just be like a race to the finish, but often like this they'll involve passing through the same bit of the level twice. And because of the way that movement works, and because of the way that these toggle mines and enemies work, there's quite a lot of ways for them to make the return journey feel. One moment, I've just heard my doorbell going, and I'm the only one in the house, so we're going to do an intermission. Bear with me. We're back. Right. Sorry about that. I was distracted because I could hear the doorbell. My partner has left her keys at home, so forgive me for the interruption. So, as I was saying before, I was distracted. There's a lot of the game design in these levels that's kind of based around making the return journey across the level interesting. Now, here they're able to do it just by the fact that going up some levels is very different than coming down some levels. But it's something that's worth considering with dungeon design if you're reusing spaces. Looking at how it could be different when you come back. So if the dungeon is about getting into somewhere and then getting out with the treasure, how can you make getting out as interesting as getting in? Or at least make it feel different. And the part of that with this game comes from the thing that I've not mentioned yet, which is actually incredibly obvious. That every level is just one screen. Now that is a restriction in some senses. It means that they can't have, scrolling levels. Sort of very long levels that you have to make the most of the space you've got. So some of the longer levels are like maze-like kind of things that go in and out on themselves, and they force you to go into the same area multiple times. But the trade-off is everything is incredibly clear. You can see everything that you're going to have to do. There's not that moment, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but in some games there's that moment where you overcome a challenge and then the game reveals the next challenge, and there's that feeling of, oh, I'm never going to be able to do that bit. You get that here sort of when you move to a new level, but within the same level you kind of know what you're doing straight away. You know what your challenge is going to be. Now if you're like me, you may not have actually looked ahead, so you still get the sense of surprise because you're bad at planning. So this is interesting because you've got a kind of symmetrical thing going on here. There we go, we're through. So yeah, I think the very narrow use of space, it's kind of reminiscent of one-page dungeons. I think one-page dungeons, if you're interested in making one-page dungeons, definitely look at this game and sort of think about how you can apply some of the same lessons to one-page dungeon designs. You might have also noticed that there's 5 of these levels in each episode, which kind of there's that whole 5-room dungeon design thing that some people talk about. that I thought was an interesting kind of parallel. Now, about halfway down my list. So this is going to turn into a little bit of a gush fest. But before I go much further, there's just a few little things that I think are really cool about this game. It's a very difficult game, and it would be very easy to get stuck. Like, there are some levels that are just way too hard for me to do. So let me have a look. Let me load up one of the more difficult ones. So they sort of get harder as you go from left to right. So I don't remember what these ones are like, but this is like the final episode of the first row. And I'll try and do this while I'm talking about the difficulty. So I've said already that there's like variable difficulty in that usually there's just a route where you can just go to the exit, and that can be your challenge that you set for yourself. You don't have to like go for all the gold. Right, where am I actually going here? There we go, okay. So there is variable difficulty, but you will have noticed when I was selecting the levels that you do have quite a lot of choice as to what order to address the levels in. You don't have like absolute choice. No, okay. You don't have like absolute choice. You can't just go straight to the last level. There's a degree of like unlocking to be done. But I'm calling it a wide bottleneck is my analogy here, where if you're going to put a bottleneck in your game, like a room in the dungeon that sort of must be passed before you can advance any further, maybe consider making it quite a wide bottleneck, so it's not just one room. It might be like an area that you have to get through, but there are multiple ways through it. You know, you don't have to make everything completely open, but didn't think I could do that. You don't have to make it so everything is completely open, but being able to take different approaches and move away from something that is just like too difficult for you right now. There's definitely something to be said for that. Right, I'm going to concentrate on this, and if I'm not able to do it on the next run... Oh, that wasn't meant to be a rage quit. Right, this is the one, or else we're quitting. Right, one more. So you can see, like, when you get the movement right, you can build up some pretty amazing speed. And again, I am not for a second saying that this is a first-class performance. So that is terrible. It's kind of like a, you know, I know that there's like Mirror's Edge is the one that everyone thinks of as like the free-running game, and obviously you've got like Tony Hawk's and stuff, but these games also remind me a lot of like the way that it feels to when you're playing a racing game. Weirdly, I do quite like a kind of straightforward like track racing game, like running time trials. There's something quite satisfying about it, just getting like a track locked down and sort of improving your time. There's a lot of that kind of feel with controlling your character, like you're mastering movements, or not mastering movements, as the case may be here. Right, let's go this way. Right, okay, we're going back. So yeah, as you can see, all the levels that are in grey here, I can choose any of these episodes to play. And I've also got all these ones in the Ultimate version, and I've also got all these Legacy levels. So wide bottlenecks, I think, are something that is interesting to take from here. In terms of the actual level design, I know I've spoken about it a little bit. I'm going to go to the editor for a second. I'm not going to go into the editor, but let's do it. So there is a very solid editor in this game. In fact, it is the editor that is it is essentially the same editor that was used to design the levels in the game, as far as I'm aware. Certainly any level that's in the game can be made using this editor. There's no hidden tools that they have access to, or rather hidden content, sorry. So you can kind of like make whatever is in the game, already. And what I like about it is that you can just hit tab and immediately you're testing it. I know that my head's in the way of the ninja at the bottom here. But yeah, this is a level that I've been working on for about 2 minutes today. And I deliberately made this level kind of bad. I called it the heist. So this is what happens when you try and put like every element into a level. So I've got like a turret here, I've got toggle mines, and then when I go through here, I've got these. Whoa, right, okay, I've got this patrol drone after me, and I've got a Gatling gun there, and I've actually come the wrong way anyway. So it's very easy to make a bad level, and it's very easy to just throw all these elements in and hope that it works out. But what a good level will do, and I'm not for a minute suggesting that any of my levels on here are good, but I think levels that really work well take one thing and run with it, and sort of take one or maybe two elements and sort of really focus on them. So let's look at this. So this level's called Reflux. I'm not going to just like go through every single one of the levels I've made, but I've tried to sort of focus on like one or two elements. So in this, all we have is lots and lots of mines and long jumps over those mines, and we have these boost pads. There we go, let's try again. These boost pads that sort of throw you forwards. So this is a level all about using these boost pads. And on the way down, it's quite straightforward. You're getting used to using these boost pads and you're avoiding the mines. And then when you hit the switch, you've got to then get back without using the boost pads. So it's still not a difficult level, but I think there's something to be said for a level that is easy to complete and then difficult to get a good score. I'm aware that I said it was easy to complete just as I died dramatically. But yeah, this is a level that I think is, I'm kind of happy with it as a little level of its own. It's not spectacular, but I know that when they were designing their own levels, Metanet had a scoring system they were like applying internally. So they set like a difficulty. I don't remember specifically, but say it was like a score of 1 to 10. And they would use that to sort of decide where to put the level in the episode list. But then they also had a score of how special the level was. I think it was just a score of quality, and they would say, okay, let me concentrate on this. And their score for quality was either 0 for like it's no good, 1 for a score of 1 for it's it's a solid level that does the job, and 2 for it's a very special level, like it's super memorable, it does something interesting that isn't being done by any other level, and it's the kind of one you're going to remember, and it might be that it has a particularly striking design, visual design I should say. It could be that it's especially difficult but rewarding when you complete it. It could be that it's it's using a lot of different elements. How did I do this? Let's go back. I'm going to put my replay on here, so that at least it is me playing it. Let's do this properly. So there we go. So this is my replay, so I can talk properly. So yeah, they use this thing about like it's either 0, which is bad, 1 means it's solid, or 2 means it's like a special one. And they said that they didn't want to have like 4,000 2-point levels. Like they weren't all going to be special. They weren't all meant to be like super memorable. I heard it sort of likened to like the dynamic range of a piece of music. Like you don't want just a 3.5 minute long, like if your song's got like a massive chorus, it's okay to have the verses be like more mellow and have like a sort of break where things sort of calm down a bit. You can have a song be like a 5-minute long, you know, ripping guitar solo, but it's probably not going to be as impactful as having that dynamic range. And it links very nicely to the whole sort of empty room theory in dungeon design, where you can have these rooms that I prefer the term normal room, in that it's something that doesn't contain a monster or a trap. These kind of breaks, if you like, that almost let you have a little bit of a breather. They can still be a sort of mild challenge, but they're there to sort of be like your verse between the choruses, if you like. Yeah, Awkward Turtle also says like about having different ways to bypass the same obstacle. So one thing that I like about this, and this is that there's no link here between this and role-playing games, but I just think it's cool, is you can watch other people's replays of any level. So I can look at, this is the number 1 record on this level. There's only 4 people that have played this level, I should say, but on this one you can see this is probably what you would call a 1-point level, because there's only really one way of attacking it. In fact, this is probably a 0. I think this level is a bit too close to just, you know, learning to execute the level. I think a good level has multiple ways for you to take it on, and with a good dungeon. And again, there's a game development conference video for N++ where the 2 developers talk about this, that I definitely recommend looking up. I think it's called, if you search for Empowering the Player N++, I believe that's the name of the talk. And they talk about the relationship between the designer of the level and the player, and how it's kind of a two-way conversation, and they wanted the player to not just be trying to execute the challenge. So you weren't just saying to them, right, you've got to go A, B, C, D, E, and then F, and then you're done. Instead, you're given, you've got to get from A to F, and then the in-between is all up to you. This is a more, this level has, I think, a few more different ways to actually deal with it. So we'll look at the lowest score of how somebody got through this level. For the sharp-eyed amongst you, you will see that this level is called Head Over Heels, and is definitely a reference to the old game, which I believe, I can't remember if I had it on the ZX Spectrum or the Amiga, but it was a game where it was like an isometric puzzle game where you had head and heels with the 2 characters, and one was, it's weird to think about. One was like, they were both like kind of like dog-like creatures, but one of them had like, was just like 2 feet and a head, and one of them was like a head that could fly kind of thing. Skyfall of Dust says it was a cat and a dog. Was it? Yeah, I think the feet were a cat, but was heels a cat and head was a dog? It was very weird in the way that it looked. It had a very crazy visual design. But the idea was that, yeah, one of them could like walk around on the ground and one of them could fly. It was the kind of the basic premise, and you could jump between the 2 characters. So here I've used that design kind of simulated by these 2 enemies, one of which will fly at you and one of which will run at you. These ones that fly are very nasty. They're called death balls. Now I don't know why this player is running all the way back to the start, because they've not touched the switch yet. So that will be why their score was so poor. You know, I feel bad for this player. I'm going to put them out of their misery, and we're going to go to the high score on this level. Oh, okay. We're having some issues here. There we go. So this is the record on the Head Over Heels level. So again, it's kind of linear in the way that the switches are set up. So if I was to do this again, I would want to embrace that kind of the idea that you want the player to be not just executing the dance, but they are also the choreographer. And obviously the relation to dungeon design there is very clear. I do like dungeons that sort of present problems to be solved rather than tasks to be completed. So rather than, you must kill the monsters in this encounter in order to advance, just put the monsters there and say, these monsters are in your way. Now what do you do? And present a number of ways that this could potentially be dealt with. So there we go. That is the number one performance on this level. For the very quick D&D, the most popular. I'm having some server issues here. The most popular level that I've done with a massive. I don't know how many people have played it. I don't know. It's not telling me, but this has had the most players, and I think it's entirely because I called it Beholders, and it looks like a mountain. So remember what I said about how I like all this sort of striking minimalist design of these shapes, but with the player created levels, people do tend to gravitate towards something that has a bit of a character to it. So this is obviously like the story of this mountain is obviously that you're trying to escape these beholders that are coming for you. I do like these enemies, these death balls. They just come towards you, like they're not clever at all. They'll bump into each other. They're completely just like straightforward, but they're so scary. Now, here we go. So now we're in the vault. We've got the treasure from the dungeon, and we need to get to the top of the mountain to escape. And we've just got 3 beholders in our way. So this level's not even that good. Like it's very easy, and but I like that it tells you a little bit of a story. So there's a lot more that I could talk about with this game, but I think I've kind of covered the big ones. The main takeaways for me are working with a very small space, but making a space that can be used in multiple ways. So having the player be able to choose a more difficult route through a space for a greater reward, but having the player be able to choose that during play. So not a case of them. There's no case here where I have to go to the menu and switch it to difficulty, turn the difficulty up. Instead, I'm just on a level by level basis. I can choose to push myself for a more difficult challenge without having to interact with the menu. Enemies that are scary but operate more like puzzles to be solved, and that work well in interesting combinations with other enemies. Having a very simple core and just like doing a lot with that core. And dynamic range, so having the sort of not trying to make every single room like a super special, like memorable moments. Having some that are just, punctuation between your big hitters, and just like having little bits of storytelling as well, whether it's just a few words here or there, and letting people's imagination fill the blanks. With this game, I think I am now just going to like gush about the game. I think I've got my main points out, but I'm just going to play a little bit more of this game and gush a little bit about it, because I really do like it. I'm very glad that I reinstalled it. Right, get me back to the main game. So we'll try some levels that I've actually not finished. I know this one was giving me trouble earlier, but we'll have a look. So even later on, we're on the bottom row here. we're still seeing these levels that just like are focused on one element and just like really focusing in on that. And I think there's a lot of restraint shown in the design of this game. So to give you an example, I know that they spoke that they've written a blog post about how they use colour, and they were very reluctant to add colour into this game because the way that the game originally looked. This is the classic skin here. You know, this is how it looked when you know, when you were trying to play it at school in the browser and hope the teacher didn't see in 2005. And this is, you know, it's almost monochrome really. And they were very reluctant to add colour. They felt like the grey scheme was kind of like making a statement. And they only added colour because they sort of like really thought about it long and hard. And they decided that it did fit with what they wanted to express with this game and the sort of confidence that they wanted to have. And you know, they changed their logo to like a bright magenta colour to kind of really emphasize that. And I sound like I'm like trying to get a job at Metanet, but I know that they're I've missed the switch. No. Okay, cool. They're like their slogan or like mission statement or whatever is backward looking, forward thinking. Now, I'm not going to claim to speak on behalf of the OSR. There are lots of people that try and do that on Twitter, and they're very welcome to do that. But if I were at one of these OSR Illuminati meetings, I might suggest that that's quite a good little line. Looking backwards and looking at old designs and sort of looking at the classics and thinking about why they work. Like, why is platforming, why was it like one of the first genres to emerge, and why does it work so well? But forward thinking. So showing restraint and sort of not necessarily, I don't want to say like I'm saying people shouldn't be creative, because I like to think that some of the stuff I do is quite different, but showing restraint in how you do that in the design. Okay. I think what we're going to do is I'm going to try and beat this this episode. So I'm officially done talking about how great this game is. For the last, hopefully, no more than 10 minutes of this broadcast, I will instead be focusing purely on completing sentences, while dedicating 90% of my brain to this task. And I'm sure that will be, I'm sure the joy that I feel when I inevitably jump to victory in this challenge, I'm sure that feeling will be the greatest advert for this game that could ever exist. So these toggle mines, they're just like such a clever little thing. The other thing that I should say, I am not going to be doing this, but there is like an additional challenge in this game where if you know, challenge 1 is to like beat the level. Then you can go back and try and get all of the gold. And then there's like a third way where if you are able to toggle all of the toggle mines on, but not touch the gold. So with this level, you can see getting to the end is going to be kind of tricky, but doable. Getting to the end and getting all the gold is more time consuming and more difficult. But just imagine trying to do this level and not touch any of the gold, but also toggle on all of the mines. it's, considering there are 4,000 levels, I think it's remarkable how much they put in to really make the difficulty of the game driven by the player. Ah! I mean, is the angry streamer thing still a thing? Like, can I, if I just start getting frustrated, will I get like, will I get like extra views? Right, okay, I remember trying this one. The trick with this one is to be patient. Stay focused. And this type of level is actually one of my favourite like subclasses of level, which is a level without enemies. And when I'm making levels myself, I've only made a few, but one of the things I like to try and do is, you know, if I'm going to use enemies, then make them like a core part of that level. You know, like the head over heels level, where the entire point of that level was sort of using two types of enemies. One of them is going to be attacking you from above, and one of them is going to be attacking you from the ground. But for me, the levels without enemies are actually kind of like, there's a certain purity to them, where it is just like pure platforming. See, I'm making it very hard for myself with these toggle mines, aren't I? Yeah, I'll just hit one instead. And in case you can't tell by looking at it, the it's all vector graphics, which makes things look very sort of smooth and everything like that. And you know, it's not a style that, certainly at the time, it's not a style that I'd really seen very much outside of like Geometry Wars. I know was like vector based, but one of the good things about it is you've got like very precise hitboxes. Like there's none of this thing where you've got like a weird sort of hitbox around the character that doesn't feel right, and you kind of have to like learn to operate within it. Instead, it does just feel like, you know, the hitbox isn't something you think about, it's just kind of there. Ah! It's good to get a few stupid deaths out of the way. Get the mighty system. I'm aware that I've just gone silent now, and hopefully the hardcore that have like stuck with the stream this long, you'll be getting something out of this, at least some kind of, I mean, the music is great and it kind of feeds into the whole design. But, you know, I know what we need. We need to change our we need to change our scheme. There's this particular one that I'm looking for. Here we go. This is what I want. Super crisp outlines here. That was a practice. Super visible mines. But if you have found any of this interesting, genuinely, go to YouTube and look for it was a GDC talk by Metanet Software, and I believe it was called Empowering the Player, and it's about an hour long, but it's basically saying the things that I've said today, but like better. So I'm sorry that you've had to sit through the lesser version of it, but these boxes I do find like just about on the wrong side of frustrating. Right, this is literally the last one now. We're playing on permadeath now. If we die, we're killing the stream. I've forgotten to hit the switch. I'm not making it easy for myself, am I, here with this one? This is the other thing, you get so hung up on like a particular like bit of the level that it's very easy to forget where you're going, I find. Right, that'll do for tonight. But yes, if that at all appealed to you, I fully recommend going out and getting that now. I think, like I said, I think it's about £10, and for just playing through that introduction section, those like 100 introduction levels are worth that price alone, I would say, which sounds bizarre, but just for seeing how they teach the player teach them how to play the game, and that method of teaching is so admirable for me. Just that plus the level creator is incredibly interesting, I would say. So thank you very much for watching this episode of Bastionland Broadcasting. I will be back soon. I've mentioned that I've got an actual play video coming up. I will let you know the details about that as soon as that is confirmed, but that will be coming up in the next week or so, which is very exciting. I'm going to be playing some Electric Bastionland with some new people. But until then, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon, and stay safe.